Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. It is 9 o'clock and it's so very, very good to be with you all. Don't panic. I know there's only one of us hairy people in the screen right now. Chewy has gone to see Paxasadi performing in Dunedin and is going to be jumping in as soon as he gets back from that, which won't be too far away. Evening Jezza, evening Peter, evening Emma. Hello there, freestyle staff. Yo, freestyle staff. G'day Nick, g'day JK and everybody else who's getting in there as well. So good for you to be with us tonight. So now tonight, with Chewy coming on a bit later, what we're going to do is we're going to start the show with a pre-recorded interview. You'll remember a few nights ago, if you were with us, we ended up talking about the OCR going up. The official cash rate gets put up. When the official cash rate gets put up, interest rates go up. The reason the official cash rate goes up, we're told, is to help curb spending, to help inflation. And the question we had from Dumb Shit Corner, which is where I sit, is if I'm paying $500 a week more per month for my mortgage and not spending $500 a month on consumables, whatever, a TV, takeaways, as the media keep telling us, how is it any different? My bank balance is not any better off. Why is it better off? And we were lucky enough to get today from Otago University, Professor Stephen Knowles, to come have a chat with us about that. And also, if you did see that show and you remember, we also talked a bit about why are the interest rates so low in Switzerland. So we're going to do that as the first part of the show. We're going to play that first, and then, every chance that Chewy might be along with us before we get going on the rest of the show, which is going to be talking about the debate that Leo Molloy hosted. I was going to look at it last night. I brought it up and had a look at it, and I kind of went, really need to talk about this garbage dumpster fire. But it's in the news again today, so we're going to touch on it today and have a bit of a chat around when is a roast not really a roast. The answer to that question is when you use it to basically hurl racist comments and homophobic slurs at people not involved with the roast. Now, I've been involved with roasts, so I know a little bit about how they're supposed to work. The first thing that you do with a roast is you have comedians involved. As soon as you just get moron broadcasters, mayors, and political figures involved, it's not a roast. It's a bunch of people thinking they're being funny by saying nasty things, but not really understanding what a roast is all about. We'll get to that as we go through the evening. And also, I thought we might have a look at Paddy Gower has issues with feral cats. We talked a bit about feral cats the other day. They did an item on it last night, and it was a really, really strange item on some level, because on some level it looked like you're watching a bloodlust item with people celebrating the killing of animals. And on the other side, it was like a lot of really good information about how dangerous pests are to our native flora and fauna. So we'll have a look through the night. And also the last thing is there's been a protest tonight outside Julian Batchelor's Stop Co-Governance tour. And a friend of the show, Byron Clark, was there at the protest. And I've invited him to jump on in and come and say good day and tell us about the protest. So there's a lot that is going on tonight. But first of all, I want to talk to you a little bit about Twitter, because I had some fun on Twitter today. I don't want to broadcast the moron who put this up there, but I do want to show you a response I put out on Twitter today. Oh, actually, first of all, let's just double check, whānau, because the only time our audio ever cocks up is when Chewy's not here, because I can't test it. I'm just playing a little bit of music behind me, and I just need someone in the chat to tell me whether you can hear it or not hear it. And now I'm fading it down and taking it away. I know this is a little bit amateurish to do this, but I don't want to start playing stuff and have everyone in the chat go, I can't hear you. That hasn't happened for a very, very, very long time, but always good to double check. Thank you, Nick. There we go. We're sorted. You can hear it. So we were talking a bit about the gangs last night, yeah? And we're talking a bit about how National is moving away from the gangs. What I love most about Twitter is, without getting into a heavy debate, just cutting someone off at the knees who says something ridiculous with just a stupid piece of evidence that knocks their argument away. So someone on my Twitter feed today, and I'm not interested in promoting this person, so I'm not putting their tweet up, when we talked about the science and what they were saying about how to deal with gangs, they responded by saying, science on gangs by a food biochemist is like pirouettes by a 140 kilogram prop forward. And I want to show you what my response to that was. So, we should never listen to the science from someone who's a biochemist talking about gangs, just like you could never, ever find a 140-kilo person doing pirouettes. It's as ridiculous as one another. And so this was my response. Now, with respect to the dancer in question, I don't know who's 140 kilos, but I don't. When you can get your argument shot down by a meme, I think that's kind of fun. Right, let me actually also show you something else that I got off Twitter today. Calvin Morgan has put this out, and there is a thing called Zello. I didn't know too much about what Zello was, but basically it turns your cell phone into a walkie-talkie. So it's an app that turns your cell phone into a walkie-talkie. During the Wellington protests, apparently Zello was getting used quite a lot between the protesters. And at one point, there was a recording made by someone in the Zello group chat as to what was being said about Chantelle Baker and the help that she needed. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying very clearly, I don't know if this commentary is genuine. What I do know is that it was recorded on the day of the final part of the protest, right? The correct day. And it was recorded in the group chat where all the protesters were. But what we can't be 100% sure of is, was it some pranksters who got in there and did it? Or was it actually protesters? And this is how far they've gone with their tinfoil hat wearing. Now, it's so far gone, I struggle to believe it, but I want to play it to you anyway, because if it's pranksters, it's a brilliant prank. And if it's not, it's a terrifying look at who the protesters are and what they believe. So remember, this was definitely recorded on the morning of the protest. It was definitely recorded in the protesters group chat for Zello, and it was definitely recorded off Zello. And I say we, the people who have put this out have seen the evidence for that. What can't be quantified or absolutely given 100% assurance is if these are protesters speaking or if they're not. So let me play you this audio about concerns to do with Chantelle Baker having a headache and how the protesters think they can fix that.
Yeah, copy that, free from birth. Yeah, I think they've got the EWP back up again. Yeah, I'm myself to get some more protection.
Yeah, I've been hearing Chantelle Baker on the stream. She's been coughing a lot, and it's probably the energy weapons. It's probably the EMF. And so she needs, can someone get down there with like a space blanket or something for her? Cheers.
Yeah, copy that, free from birth. What's her 20? You got a 20 on her location?
Yeah, she's up a tree near the Court of Appeals. Yeah.
Copy. I'm on route now with a roll of tinfoil. Someone's taken my roll of tinfoil to the front lines, but I've got a metal bucket. Do you think that'll work?
Yeah, anything metal that you can get her covered in, that'll help.
Solid copy.
On Chantelle's stream, she says that Antifa are present. So we've got confirmation Antifa are present. The Antifa people might be dressed up in riot gear, so just keep an eye out for that.
Copy that. I'm down here right now trying to get a positive ID on an Antifa. Hey, do you have a way of getting a more clear identification? There's a lot of police down here in riot gear, so it's hard to tell who the Antifa might be.
Now, I tend to agree with JM, the text that I put up, the message I put up while we were talking, which was got to be a prank. I kind of lean that way as well, but we're not 100% sure. And that's in and of itself kind of scary, because they were concerned about various weapons being used against them. But like we said, even Rob said, it's got to be a prank. There's no way that's real. But what we do know, this is confirmed. It was in the protesters group chat for Zello, and it was recorded on the morning of the final day of the protest. So those things are true. So if it is a prank, they have worked a long way to get there, because they've got themselves into the chat, and they're a part of the community in that chat before they've done it. But yes, look, I don't necessarily disagree with you, and I'm not going to come out like a certain broadcaster on a certain platform and absolutely say this is truth. We don't know, but either way, pretty bloody funny. It's pretty bloody funny because we do know that, I mean, you've seen photos of people that were covering themselves in space blankets and literally wearing tinfoil hats whilst they were there to protect themselves. All right, huge thanks to all our patrons. Love you guys to bits. Thanks for being on board. If you want to be be a part of a bit of what we do, then you can very simply go to patreon.com/bighairynews. You also probably know about our new store that has started up to do with our drops for July. We'll talk more about that later on, but right now I just want to bring some attention to our patrons, to our lovely patrons who have been with us financially since before we started up the store. So we love you guys to bits and we thank you for being involved. If you want to support what we do, if you like what we do, then all you need to do is head to patreon.com/bighairynews. For those of you who have joined us since we've started and you're just seeing one hairy newser, Chewy is at a comedy gig right now, and he will be along after that to join in. What time exactly that is, I'm not entirely sure, but he will be along at some stage during the show. So what we'll do is we'll start with the pre-recorded conversation that I had with Professor Stephen Knowles from Otago University. Professor Knowles is in the economics department, and we wanted to talk to him about this conversation we started a couple of nights ago, which was, if we're being told that we want to curb spending, how is it better for society? How is it better for the economy for that $500 to not be spent on a TV, but to be spent on interest rates for the mortgage? Why is that better? How is that better? And that was the conversation that I had this afternoon with Professor Stephen Knowles. Here it is for you right now, and I will be back to you after this. Maybe with a chewy, maybe without, but I will see you in about 15 minutes. Let's welcome to the show Professor Stephen Knowles from the University of Otago, Department of Economics. Stephen has two main research interests: experimental economics and the empirical modelling of economic growth and development. Stephen, I don't know if that makes you the perfect person to ask this question to, but
that doesn't really.
Okay.
So what you're asking doesn't relate to my research interests, but I teach a bit on this stuff. I know a little bit about it. So
okay,
yeah.
So this is based, for people who are joining us tonight for the first time, on a question that me and Chewy had we have like a stream of consciousness conversation when we do our live streams, and we started pondering, because we were talking about interest rates going up in the banks, right? We played a story off the news, and in the middle of that conversation we started to ponder about this is becoming much more expensive for New Zealanders to live. I myself are on about a 4.1% mortgage rate at the moment. In 9 months, if it goes to the current numbers, I will either have to put $80,000 on my mortgage, which I don't have, to keep my outgoings the same, or it'll be about another $120 a week. So the question was asked, now correct me if I'm wrong, if my premise is wrong, but we're being told that Reserve Bank is trying to sort of help or control, might be the wrong word, inflation. And one of the things it's doing is increasing the OCR, and increasing the OCR in turn has put mortgage rates up, and the mortgage rates are costing us more. So in my mind, I'm kind of going, how is it any better for us citizens? How is it better for the economy? How is it better overall if we're not spending $500 a month on takeaways? We've curbed that spending, but we're just spending exactly that same $500 a month, or maybe more, on our mortgages. So our outgoings haven't changed. We're still spending it just on interest, not consumables. So hoping you can shed some light on that for us.
Yeah, look, so that's a really good question. And I think there's a couple of answers that can be given to that question. So the first one is that high interest rates are bad news for some people, but they're good news for others. So people who have got debt, if they've got a mortgage, any other sort of debt, obviously interest rates going up means that they're having to spend more money on that. But there's a big chunk of the population, obviously, who are net savers. You know, think of people who are nearing retirement or who have retired, and as well as their national super money, they like to earn some interest each month to help with the expenses as well. So higher interest rates are good for that group. So that's the first point I'd make. The second point would be that hopefully, well, actually, I'm going to make 3 points. So the first one is that the interest. I've made my first point. I'm now going to make my second. So interest rates are certainly high at the moment compared to what they were, sort of from from COVID through to about 2022. And they've now started going up. But historically, these are not really high interest rates that we're seeing now. I first took out a mortgage about 20 years ago and interest rates were a lot higher back then. But the other thing is that the interest rates we've got now that are higher than what people have been used to for the last few years, they're not necessarily going to need to stay high forever. Hopefully we're not too far away. Well, we're actually at the point where we have seen inflation is starting to come down, and if that continues to happen, there'll be a point where the Reserve Bank can let interest rates go down again. Inflation, on the other hand, if it's allowed to get embedded, inflation will stick around for a lot longer, and people don't want to experience for many, many years into the future to find that the price of fruit and veg and petrol and pretty much everything else they buy is going up. So I guess that's the response I'd make to that question.
So I can repeat to you, so I'm learning here. I'm in your classroom right now. Good for some, not for others. So therefore, people like me who don't have a lot of savings but have a mortgage, I'm screwed. Well, I'm screwed. I'm worse off in this situation. People who have 100 grand in the bank because they've been saving for 50 years and they're looking for their retirement are getting now a good return on that of maybe the same amount more per week.
Well, when you say people with 100 grand in the bank, that makes it sound like these are really wealthy people. But we could be talking here about people who don't have a lot of people who are saved, and they're in their retirement and they're counting on earning some interest from that money. The other thing is too that people in that position. Inflation is actually higher than the amount of interest we're earning. So even though inflation rates might feel high, those people are still actually going backwards, but they'd be going backwards even more if interest rates were lower.
I also obviously completely agree with you on the interest rates today. I mean, I'm sure we've all heard, depending on our age, of our parents or grandparents or whoever old we are, having, like 19% interest in the 1980s and that sort of thing. So we get that. But I guess what I'm still unclear on is why is it better? In other words, why is it better for the economy to have my $500 not be spent on a big screen TV, curbing spending, but to have that same $500 spent on interest for my mortgage? Why is that better? Why does that make me or society better off, even in the long run?
So that's another good question. So basically, we get inflation when people have more money to spend than there is stuff on the shelf to buy. So the only tool that the Reserve Bank has really to try and deal with inflation is to put interest rates up to try and dampen people's spending on goods and services like TVs, right? So they want to stop people spending money on those things because there's, the fact that prices are going up suggests that there's not as many goods to go around as people are wanting to buy. And one way to deal with that is for people to have less money in their pocket to buy that kind of thing.
Is there, and because I'm ignorant, right, I kind of think about,
I'm sure you're not.
Is this the man just shitting on the little guy? Is this sort of like, because I think about what you're saying and I'm thinking, as always, those with the least will get impacted most of all. Those with the most, right, they'll be able to eat or absorb any extra costs coming with their mortgage, or maybe they're mortgage free or have smaller mortgages. Those with the least will be the ones that are hit most of all. Is there any aspect of this that there's been errors made before that now those that are the most vulnerable are needing to clean up within society because of these interest rates? You know what I mean?
So I guess a couple of points on that. So the first one is if we do nothing and we allow inflation to carry on the way it is, it's the people on the lowest incomes in society that are most impacted by that. So, people who have got some savings to fall back on or who are in a strong bargaining position in their job will be able to negotiate a wage increase that's not too far out of line with inflation. And actually plenty of people are managing to do that. But people who are in less secure jobs, who don't have as much bargaining power, they're the ones whose wages aren't going to go up. So inevitably, inflation tends to impact on the weakest members of society. But you're also asking here about, whether some mistakes have been made. And I guess hindsight is a wonderful thing, right? So I don't want to point the finger at anybody. But back when COVID was first a thing, there were dire predictions from many people about how, the this was going to be terrible. We'd see unemployment go through the roof, and it didn't. And the reason it didn't go through the roof was, due in large part to the government spending a lot of money through things like the wage subsidy, and also the central bank, in New Zealand's case, the Reserve Bank, reducing interest rates. And those policies were almost too successful. And the fact that and they were too successful in the sense that, we've ended up with inflation. So, we've managed to keep unemployment really low. The unemployment that people predicted we were going to get simply has not happened. But perhaps the Reserve Bank was a little slow. And again, hindsight's a wonderful thing, and I wouldn't want the Reserve Bank governor's job for anything. But maybe if they'd been a bit quicker at increasing interest rates a bit earlier, they wouldn't have to have gone as high as they have. And maybe if the government sort of pulled back a bit on some of the spending sooner, then we may not have got this inflation either. But, the situation New Zealand is in, and I know you want to talk about Switzerland, but the situation New Zealand in is very similar to most other OECD countries. Governments responded to COVID by spending lots of money. Central banks reduced interest rates. The unemployment that we'd been fearing never came in those countries, but we now have inflation as a result of that, and we have high interest rates as a result of that. And the inflation rates we've got in New Zealand and the interest rates we've got here are not too dissimilar to countries like Australia and the UK.
In fact, most key markers for the last 6 months, we've been better than all bar a couple with our inflation and those sorts of things. It's flipping a little bit now, but for the past 6 months, we've been in the top sort of 1, 2, what I refer to as kind of our Western country counterparts. Maybe not China, maybe not Japan, but our like-minded sort of countries.
Yeah, well, the inflation that those sorts of countries have got is nothing compared to what some other countries have got. So, Turkey, for example, has inflation rates that are much higher. That's one example. But yeah, we're pretty similar to most other of the advanced OECD economies.
So we are now paying, my word, for the borrowing / printing money / supplying money, whichever word people want to use, that we did during COVID. These are the effects from that. And I guess is that a fair way to think about it? Where this is the consequences of the government doing a couple of things: keeping businesses going, because that's what the wage subsidy did, and also shutting our borders, keeping our per capita death rate so much lower than a good portion of the rest of the world. We're now paying for that medical intervention and business intervention today in the form of higher interest rates and inflation. Is that a fair synopsis?
It's a reasonably fair synopsis. But like I said before, hindsight's a great thing, and we do have to remember that the economic disaster that many people were predicting was averted by those policies. I guess the other thing to acknowledge too is that one of the things that contributes to inflation is if you have supply shocks within the economy. So if it's harder to get stuff in from overseas, for example, and that's certainly part of the story as well. Although interestingly, I was at a conference last week where there was someone speaking who knows a lot more about this sort of stuff than I do, who said that the evidence is that throughout the world economy, those supply constraints are very much starting to disappear. So there should be less of a problem in getting stuff in from overseas. And that has, one of the reasons, for example, the building costs have been going up is because of the difficulty of getting building supplies in from overseas. And hopefully those sort of bottlenecks are now starting to disappear.
And so just to come back one more time for this question before I ask you about Switzerland, is when I say, how is it any better? It sounds like what you're saying, it's not any better to pay $500 on your mortgage than for your TV. It's not necessarily any worse. It just is what it is right now based on the last 3 years.
Yeah, I think that would be a fair summation. So for someone in the position that you've described, it's no better, it's no worse, it is what it is. But for people who are net savers who prefer higher interest rates, it's good for them. But the other thing is, I'm reasonably confident that we're not going to be looking at high-ish interest rates for the next many years. This is a temporary phenomena. No one knows exactly how long. It would be far worse to say, well, let's just let the inflation genie out the bottle and keep interest rates low, because most people hate inflation. And, I teach a little bit about this in first year economics, and until last year, we would have to try and convince students that inflation was a bad thing, right? People who had never experienced it would be like,
Gotcha.
what's the big deal about keeping inflation down? Now that people have seen what inflation does, most people are pretty keen to see it brought under control.
All right, very quickly, the second question, and as a part of this conversation, there was an item on one of the news channels that we showed, and it had a image of, it had a story, and a lady from Switzerland said, I think I might have to go back home thinking about interest rates going up so much. So we Googled there and then interest rates in Switzerland, and these are the interest rates back to 2008 for Switzerland. They've been as high as 4.5%. They've been as low, I guess, around COVID as 0.9%, and currently they sit around about 2 to 3%. There you go. The average benchmark rates from 2.71% for a 10-year fixed rate mortgage, from 2.64 for a 5 rate, and 2.65 for a 2 rate. And 2-year rate, sorry. We were just like, what the crap? How come we are looking at sort of these 6, 7, 8s? This is us New Zealand here for people who are watching on the thing. And, Switzerland, we didn't go too much further than Switzerland because that was the example given by the person on the news. Other countries that seem somewhat like-minded. Someone joked that maybe it was all the Nazi gold. That was a joke though. But how are they operating so differently that they can be a third of the mortgage rates to what we're looking at, especially with so many increases going on?
Yeah, I saw that lady on the TV news as well, and then sort of forgot about it, but have been reminded about it by your email. And since I got your email, I've jumped on Google as well and checked what inflation rates are in Switzerland by way of comparison, and they're significantly lower. So inflation rates in Switzerland are more around the 3-4% than what they are here. Now, I can't tell you why inflation is lower in Switzerland, but the reason that their interest rates will be lower is that they don't have the inflation problem to deal with that we do. Switzerland's an interesting comparison, but interest rates here, again, they're not that different to, say, Australia or the UK. I also looked up what interest rates are in Australia, and it's hard to find an exact comparison with exactly the same term and stuff. But interest rates might be a percentage point or two higher here than in Australia, but they're not way higher.
Yeah, all right. So
I think the simple answer is Switzerland hasn't got to worry about inflation.
So inflation is directly related, whatever, I don't know whether they have an OCR, whatever their version of the OCR is, hasn't had to be increased, which hasn't increased interest rates, hence lower interest on their mortgages.
Well, they've probably increased interest rates a little, but not to the extent that has happened here. And I have to admit, I don't know what's behind Switzerland's good fortune in not having had the inflationary pressures that most of the rest of the world has had.
We thought that it might be that the world's on the gold standard or the US dollar, maybe Switzerland's on some kind of chocolate conversion, Swiss chocolate conversion, because they probably have the market cornered, and that's what we thought it might be. But that was just a theory, Steve.
You never know. Your guess is as good as mine.
From the University of Otago, Department of Economics, Professor Stephen Knowles. Stephen, thanks so much for jumping in today and giving us a few minutes.
Cheers, Pat. It's fine. Good to chat.
Alrighty, there you go. Hopefully you enjoyed that. So basically, kind of makes sense when a smarty pants explains it to us. We made decisions in New Zealand, and our decision was basically health over commerce when it came to COVID. Yes, the numbers of people catching COVID is pretty much the same percentage-wise the world over. The only difference is because New Zealand and countries like Australia were able to offset for so long those cases hockey sticking and to offset them until we got the vaccine, the death rate per capita is far, far lower than other similar countries. Places that opened their borders sooner, places that actually just have borders with other countries, places that opened business sooner, places that didn't have subsidies for workers, so people had to go back to work. Those kind of places it's funny because they have a lot of them have a similar or bit less inflationary rate right now, but their death rate per capita is so much higher. So therefore, what that means is if I can be blunt, what we're paying for now is collectively having more of our New Zealand brothers and sisters still alive. That's what it comes down to. The pain we're feeling financially today is a direct result of the Labour government helping business during a time when many would have failed, and more New Zealanders alive today. Now, you have to decide whether that payoff, that offset, is worth it. You know, maybe more businesses go bankrupt, more New Zealanders dead, and also that means therefore not as high inflation right now. If that's a fair trade in your books, that's your call. But this is where we're at, and I guess when I think about it that way, I'm kind of okay with it. I would rather have several thousand, tens of thousands, whatever the number would be, more New Zealanders alive and be paying some more for my mortgage than all of those people being dead and all of those businesses being shut down and being paying $50 a week less. But then there'll be some people who can't afford that, so you're entitled to your own opinion on that. Simon says end up spending on Aussie banks, meaning the $500 is not on TVs, but it's on the Aussie banks. Vicky says those with the least aren't paying their mortgages but rent. Yep, and I guess they go up because the mortgages go up. Rob says, I don't quite understand the logic regarding reduced amounts of goods. I don't feel hampered by lack of goods, just lack of cash. Yeah, I'm not sure if you're saying exactly what I'm about to say, Rob, but I'm interested as well as, and I'm not naive enough to say that this is the answer, but what would have happened if we had done nothing to end up curbing inflation? Like if we had have done nothing. Now, I know that we've had examples in the past like Zimbabwe where you've had to literally wheel a wheelbarrow down the road to get a loaf of bread. I get it. But if there's too much money and not enough goods, eventually would it even itself out, because eventually they'd find a price point where people are going to go, that's too expensive, I'm not going to buy that TV now, because the business can put its price up. And would it just even itself out? Or would inflation just keep on going? I don't know. But it was a thought that I pondered in this conversation. Speaking of the wage subsidy, JM says, the wage subsidy saved me as a sole trader. Talking about the 20 years ago, house prices weren't as inflated 20 years ago. Mortgage was around 9%, says Nikki. Sunset says National, saying New Zealand has higher inflation and worse economic conditions versus other countries, saying Labour government caused high inflation due to high spending. Yeah, but see, you can kind of argue that due to high spending, but the high spending was on health and on keeping businesses alive. So that's why, as many of you are saying in the chat, media needs to call them out. Josie also says, I think the supply issues have mostly existed on the level of intermediate goods. Doesn't mean there wasn't profiteering to be done at our expense. And can I just say as well, the chat's gone absolutely bananas. I'm sorry, I missed, there's only one of me on. Pardon me. I missed a bunch of stuff that's going on in the chat. So I hope you guys are being nice to each other and having a lovely chat in there, but I've missed the last 20 or 30 messages whilst I was reading other messages. Let me very quickly invite you to be a part of what we're doing by telling you a little bit about our July drop for merchandise. Today's episode is brought to you by bhnshop.nz. Yep, that's right. Big Hairy News has merch that enables you to both support what we do and allows you to voice your political opinions via the international medium of clothing. Head to bhnshop.nz for this month's drop of either If the Left Vote, the Left Wins, or Christopher Luxon, not a businessman, just a board member, with free delivery in New Zealand. This month's drop ends July 20th, so be quick and head to bhnshop.nz to make your order and support what we're doing to fight mis- and disinformation this election cycle. That's bhnshop.nz. Yes, very good. Gosh, that was a crazy fade back to me, wasn't it? Seeing there's only one of me on tonight, it kind of was a... What was it called when like Terminator 2 came out and they invented that technology where the silver on screen could morph? I don't think it was called morphing. Right, we're going to move into another story that's quite heavy on the video content because we haven't got Chewy with us now, and I've just heard from Byron that he's probably 10 minutes away from coming on board. So I think what we'll do tonight is talk about Paddy Gower having issues, and Paddy Gower has issues tonight, or in the episode last night, with feral cats. It was when I say it was interesting, it was an interesting. There was lots of interesting decisions made in this piece from Paddy Gower and the team at News Hub, because on some level, it feels like a bit of a blood sport, and people celebrating over killing all of these animals, woohoo, and swinging them around their heads, not literally. But on another point, and I'll play you several clips, a lot of really interesting information. Now, I'm someone who said publicly last time we had this conversation, I would happily lose every feral cat in the country, every possum, every stoat, every rat, everything to protect our native species. But even me, who says that, I felt a little bit uncomfortable with the, and I guess I should warn you, with the graphic images coming up here, they do not show any close-ups, but there are there are realities in this story where you see people shooting cats from a distance, but you see them shooting cats. So just so I'm giving you a fair warning if that's not your bag. Actually, it's not my bag either, but it's a news story worth talking about. So let's have a look at Paddy Gower having issues around feral cats. I've got a few clips to play you.
I'm at Cranford Downs Farm in North Canterbury, and this lot are just about to check their traps for feral cats. Is it pretty easy to trap these cats?
To be fair, it's probably the best way to get them because they're such a stealthy animal. You don't usually see them, you know. You set a trap and you're bound to get one.
Does that sound like
They've found the cat.
they've found a cat?
That's the cage.
North Canterbury farmer Matt Bailey has invited me out with his family and the neighbours' kids hunting feral cats. Yeah, you can tell it's actually a really sort of angry kind of animal.
Oh,
So this is the bit that I don't know what Paddy Gower was trying to do, but what I see is a scared animal, not an angry animal. I see an animal that, yes, is wild, that, yes, is feral, but is still in the utmost amount of fear, as you would be. The way they'll portray it, and this is when I started watching this, I was like, what's the angle they're taking here? The way they started this was a bit like, look at this angry, disgusting animal. I wonder, it's almost like Paddy Gower's parts in this felt a little bit like blood sporty, whereas the other journalists who were involved in this, they felt more information, but you can decide for yourself.
they are, yeah. They're pretty psychotic.
This is not a domestic cat.
No.
You know, nobody's going to mistake this.
No.
It's a big, angry,
Yep.
wild animal. What do the words feral cat mean to you?
Basically a destructive, feral, nasty predator, you know. And the apex predator is the issue. Nothing else hunts it. We've got to do our part.
And that's about as humane way of killing as you can get.
Instant.
Instant.
Yeah, didn't hear the bang. Lights out.
Matt's an organiser of the North Canterbury Hunting Competition, a community-run fundraiser for the Rotherham School and Pool. But after public backlash, they withdrew the category for children to hunt feral cats.
There are people in the chat saying, that's a big cat. Yeah, Nikki is saying, that's a big cat. I agree, and that probably just goes to show how much food the fucking feral cats are actually eating. So that shows the damage they're doing. I've got some stats and some figures for you about what they are eating with a few more clips. This first clip goes for about 2.5 minutes, and then I've got 3 or 4 little kind of 40-second clips to play you as well.
How have you found the attitude of some townies to your kids hunting cats?
We've copped the backlash about it, but our kids have grown up hunting, gathering. They're just so used to it, We're out there shooting the possums and the rabbits, A cat's going to go down if we see one too, because it's feral, it's wild, and it shouldn't be here. We're going to take the side of our native species. I haven't heard a tui, in the bush around here for years, or had a wood pigeon barrel on past, when I'm walking through it.
Does it surprise you that feral cats aren't in Predator Free 2050?
Yeah.
So this is a big part of this story. Predator Free 2050 was brought in, I think, in 2017, talking about the animals we have to get rid of. The one part of this conversation which is really interesting, and we get onto it with some of the other journalists, is rabbits, stoats, possums, rats, they're all in there. Feral cats are not in there. So they are, it's a weird way to say it, but they're kind of a protected class at the moment because they're not in the government legislation to actually eradicate, to protect our species, yet they are as damaging as many of the other ones that are. We'll keep watching, keep listening about that.
Yeah, that's just madness. I don't know how we're going to be predator free if they're not.
Just down the road is a nesting spot for the critically endangered black-fronted tern. There's as little as 5,000 of them left.
We had 17 nests here last year, all taken over by cats.
All taken out by cats?
All taken out, yep. No survival at all.
Dave McKenzie is part of a volunteer conservation group. They've caught feral cats on camera, killing these birds and eating their eggs.
We're probably 5 to 10 k's away from the nearest house. These aren't the cats that sit on the sofa at night. These are cats that live in the wild. A lot of time, effort, money and resources goes into these birds. They can actually finish the whole nesting season just, 1, 2 cats. That's all it takes.
So there you go. There's part one of this conversation. And I need to do this because I'm all by myself tonight. Flick straight over to part two. So part two is just a short 45 seconds, but this is Paddy Gower we talked about this North Canterbury hunting competition last week. That there was a bit of controversy around, and Paddy was there as well, and he talked to the people who were saying, hunting, your prize is their lives, hunting equals killing for fun. This is some of the video that he got from that, having a talk to the, would you call these the counter-protesters? Are they protesting cats and these guys are the counter-protesters, or are these the protesters? Whichever way.
Why is it a competition? Why is it glorified if it's trying to conserve wildlife, conserve nature? Is there a better way than this? That is trapping, neutering, returning to nature.
See, the problem with that, and I think we all know it, trapping, neutering, returning to nature still gets those birds wiped out in the following season. So, and look, let me say again, in case some people are misconstrued about what I was saying, I am completely about eradicating any of these pests. I'm saying from this conversation, and you're about to see a little bit of it now, the one bit I was a smidge uncomfortable with was sort of the glorification of it. Like, I watch quite a lot of hunting programs and stuff, and the ones that I find easiest to watch are the ones when someone takes a life, they're actually quite respectful of the life they've taken of the animal. This seems to be a little bit, I'm incredibly happy that I killed you. Not that I'm happy that I'm saving the birds, I'm happy that I've killed you. Again, I'm not trying to be a tree hugger because I'd like to see them all eradicated as well, but that was the only bit about this whole conversation that, I don't know, just left me a little bit sort of, you didn't really need to celebrate the blood sport, and you could have put the same message across.
Those here to hunt have come in their droves, bringing in hundreds of deer, possum, wild pigs, and plenty of feral cats. Oh, these are whoppers.
Yeah, look like it down here.
Whoa.
That's a big cat.
Well, it's nearly bigger than Archie, isn't it? Like, if you go side by side, these are all in
one location.
One location.
One location.
I mean, a native animal comes within cooey of this and it's all over.
That's right, yeah.
They're out of control?
They're out of control. They're out of control. They're out of control.
Apparently they're out of control. I think we got the gist of that. Right, now we get into a bit of more of a conversation. With a conversation around how feral cats are impacting our biodiversity. So this is now not Paddy Gower. This is other reporters as a part of the story. And this gets into the really interesting debate of it. Because my understanding is the SPCA in 2017, they would not support putting feral cats on the on the predator-free 2050 list. They weren't about it. So there's this argument that's gone around that New Zealanders love their cats. I mean, we saw it when Gareth Morgan talked about it. And because New Zealanders love their cats, they don't want to see kitty cats killed, even though these are very different animals. They're obviously cats, but they're a different species of cat. They're wild versus anything else. So SPCA was against it. They've changed their tune. We're going to get to a clip about that shortly. But this is now speaking to a biodiversity expert, talking about literally the impact that feral cats are having on our biodiversity.
Do we have enough data on the impact of feral cats on our biodiversity?
Not to the extent that it needs to be. What's become apparent over the years is a lot of groups that are making really great efforts to control key pest species are really scared to add feral cats to that list of species they're controlling. And what they're concerned about is as soon as they start mentioning that they want to control cats, people will say, well, hang on, I'm not supportive of that. I'm worried about my pet cat.
So we know how bad...
So people aren't smart enough to differentiate between Moggy sitting on their lap at night whilst, as JM is saying here, domestic cats kill too, but domestic cats... I mean, I'm not saying that's this is a defence, but I'm just saying it as the fact that domestic cats do kill. Yes, that's not okay, I agree, but they're also looked after and fed mostly by their owners, whereas feral cats are only fed by killing, so they would be more of an impact. What I'm hearing these people say is New Zealanders aren't smart enough to differentiate between Moggy sitting on my lap and feral cat out the back of North Canterbury, wiping out whole colonies of endangered birds, which seems bizarre to me.
Ferrets, stoats, rats, possums are. How do feral cats compare?
Definitely just as bad. In some circumstances, probably worse. They can kill 10 to 20 prey items within a day. Feral cats kill approximately 100 million native species a year.
Important, feral cats kill 100 million native species a year.
So we are detecting feral cats up in the beaches of Northland. We're detecting feral cats in urban parkland and up in the Murchison Mountains. The feral cats are right across New Zealand.
So there you go. The last part before we get back to a bit of a wrap up from Paddy, I was talking about SPCA. Now, it's not explicitly said in this clip, but when you see how uncomfortable SPCA is to be asked this question, it seems fairly obvious to me that they did not support in 2017 feral cats being put on the register to be pest-free by 2050. They're changing / have changed their position, but you can still see with SPCA deal with cats, SPCA deal with kittens, and the SPCA are actually saying, we care for cats, but they're now having to address a decision they made 6 years ago, which perhaps they should have been fighting for the tuis and not the feral cats, if that is indeed the case.
Anya Dale is the SPCA's Chief Scientific Officer. She took over the position just after the decision was made to exclude cats from Predator-Free 2050.
Did SPCA at that time allow emotion to get in the way of making a decision?
So I've been in my role as the Chief Scientific Officer for 7.5 years now. So I can categorically say since that time, everything has been evidence-based, everything has supporting research behind it. It is possible, historically, yes, but certainly not in the current framework.
So does the SPCA support the humane killing of feral cats?
Where it's justified, yes we do.
What does that mean, where it's justified?
Well, we're very careful around the wording that we use. Our ultimate goal is that all cats are cats on laps. Our ultimate goal is that we don't have any stray cats in New Zealand and we don't have any feral cats in New Zealand. That's a journey, a long-term journey, and we need other tools to manage our other types of cats in New Zealand.
Just in terms of the conversation here, what are the things that you're having to sort of skirt around?
Well, I think it's because when you start talking about humane cat management, sometimes people take a polarised view around that. We support the right outcomes for all species.
Okay. So
one of the problems with that, though, is the right outcomes for all species. That's like saying, I remember talking to Rodney Hyde back when he was involved in politics. He'd always say, I always vote for what brings freedom. But innately, sometimes when you're voting for the freedom of one group, it oppresses another group or it takes away the freedoms of another group. Like if you're doing what's best for all species, then sometimes doing what's best for the, let's say, feral cats is not going to be what's best for the native birds, or even for the domesticated cats is not going to be what's best for the sparrows in the area. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
Just to be clear, the SPCA does support humane killing of feral cats.
Absolutely, we do. We support that.
Everywhere?
Feral cats. Yes, feral cats, that's the right outcome.
There we go. And the very final clip, this is a Conservation Minister that is talking to Paddy Gower. And this is the last clip. And this infuriated me, to be really honest with you, because the reality is I cannot stand it when a politician basically says, we will do what the public wants. Because there are so many examples where all politicians, all political parties completely ignore what the public want and do what they want. So when they use it as an excuse, it infuriates me.
Why aren't feral cats in predator-free 2050?
When they developed the first strategy, the feedback from the public at that time was possums, rats, stoats, mustelids. It was not. It did not include cats. There was strong feedback from the public at that time that it shouldn't include cats.
There was strong feedback from the public at that time that it should not include cats. In other words, people didn't want it. They bitched and moaned, so we didn't do it. Great. So let's do that with a bunch of other things. Will they change their position based on a bunch of other things? Likely not.
However, in 2024, we begin the process of reviewing that strategy.
And if the public say feral cats are not special, feral cats need to die to save our native species, then that's what the department will do?
So I can't predetermine the outcome of that process, but certainly my understanding is that the feedback that we receive from the public will be very informative in terms of the decision.
So therefore, we can flip that around and go the other way and say if the public again say they don't want feral cats on the register, perhaps they mean they won't go on. It's infuriating. Now, look, there's a bunch of chats been going on. You guys have been talking to each other. I'll leave you with that for now because we have a guest to come into the show, and we want to say a big welcome to the show to Byron Clark, who's been out and about causing trouble tonight. Byron, good evening to you, sir.
Good evening.
How are you, man?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
No, good. As you know, I got a call from a mate of mine who was down at a certain protest with you. And so I thought once I saw that you guys were there protesting Julian Batchelor, that perhaps what we should do is grab you on tonight and have a look at what went on. So this is you at the protest tonight. We're seeing it on Twitter for people who are watching. Is there a reason that you blurred out the faces? Is that because they just didn't want to be seen? Or is it just being extra safe?
Just being extra safe. I mean, you never know who's looking at who's there, and can't be too careful these days. So I've tried to get a few photos of some of the flags and the banners, and without making people too identifiable.
All right, so let's have a look at a quick video that you shot while you were down there as well. Here's a quick video of the protest tonight. How many people?
I would estimate about, I tried to do a bit of a head count, I'd say maybe 150.
Yep. And you got a good feed as well, it would appear?
Got a good feed, yeah. I picked up a few scoops of chips on the way, and pizza had been ordered, and yeah, someone even had a big pot of pumpkin soup they'd come around with, and bowls and everything, yeah.
And Te Pāti Māori were there in force?
They were, yes, yep. I mean, they had their Te Tautoko candidate, Te Tai Tonga candidate, which in the South Island Māori electorate. He was there speaking to the crowd, so yeah, good to see him there supporting it.
And last video here, let's just put this up quite quickly to have a look what was going on.
Why are they not letting you in? They're not letting me in because why aren't you letting me in? Why aren't you letting me in? No, they don't have to answer to me.
Yeah, all right. Well, we'll take that down as well because the fantastic music you're playing in the background will get us kicked off YouTube. Now tell me, so 150 strong-ish outside, how many inside?
I'm not entirely sure. One person who was inside to ask some questions said that it was a packed hall. Another person said there were only about 30 people in there, which could be a packed hall. It's not a very big hall. So I think there's a good chance that at this event, Batchelor and his crowd were outnumbered by the protesters outside, which is encouraging.
Now, you're based in Christchurch. Was this just something that you got involved in because it was local? Is this something that's a more organised event happening and following these speeches around?
Yeah, so I mean, everywhere Julian Batchelor goes, he's met with opposition. In some places, it's been quite well organised. In other places, I think it's more people just turning up to have a say. Sometimes finding they don't get let into the event. The one here in Christchurch was organised by, I think, a few different groups got involved. Like I say, they'd arranged for like pizza and music and all that sort of thing. So, yeah, it'd been a few people working on this behind the scenes. Not something I was that involved with myself, but people I know were, and yeah, it came together really well and got a bigger turnout than I was expecting.
And give us a sense for those of us who haven't been to the protests, or maybe there's some people watching who haven't entirely kept up with what's going on. What is Julian Batchelor's tour about, as you know it, and why is there a need to protest it?
Yeah, so Batchelor's doing this whole tour around the theme of opposing co-governance, and co-governance is one of those things that, you know, it's been used as a bit of a buzzword, but people are reluctant to define it. Co-governance is something that's been happening for about a decade. Some treaty settlements have led to partnerships between iwi and the Crown, or between local government and iwi, managing different resources. And, you know, there's a push to have more of this, more of these kind of agreements. Batchelor is, I would say, not just opposing that, but promoting a, you know, very colonial worldview at these events. I've been reading some of the reports just in the media from his other tour stops. I found he uses the phrase Zimbabwe of the South Pacific quite a lot. This idea that co-governance and honouring to treaty is something akin to, you know, Zimbabwe, and that's a very charged comparison to make, because of course Zimbabwe is the country that exists after Rhodesia ended white minority rule. And I see this from people, you know, further right than Julian Batchelor, using this comparison, and it's kind of a way of dog whistling. You know, oh, things got so much worse once the white people weren't in charge anymore. So, you know, I see him going and talking to in some cases, quite big audiences, and saying we're becoming the Zimbabwe of the South Pacific, and using language like comparing Maori to plagues of locusts. And he's an evangelical preacher, so, you know, for someone from that background, this language is quite meaningful to use these kind of biblical metaphors. So, yeah, so there's a real concern about the kind of ideology that he's spreading, and what he's fomenting in an election year, but I think for politics wider than just the election as well.
Do you think people know enough about his evangelical background? Because I know a lot about it, about his evangelical background. Do you think that plays a part in this? So, for example, Julian Batchelor used to be involved with a group called Operation Jerusalem. Operation Jerusalem in the 1990s was a group, if anyone is of my ilk, my age, that used to send groups out to all the groups of like young people, teenagers in the early 20s, to all the camping grounds around the top half of the North Island during the Christmas, New Year period, to run children's programs, which were indeed, of course, a funnel to Christian teachings. That's his background from the 1990s. You know, he's a fairly wealthy man. Certainly lived in. I've actually been to his house. I had a friend who was staying with him for a while in St Heliers in Auckland. So I know quite a lot about his background. Do you think his background has much to do, should be more known about, compared to who he is today and what he's talking about? Because I've said this before, the kind of religious ideology he espouses is not a particularly good representation of the teachings of the head of the church he said to follow, being that character of Jesus Christ. It's kind of the opposite of that. Is there a connection between these two things, do you think? Is this part of, you know, you've written books, and in your book you talk a bit about the, you know, I'm using the word Christian militants. I don't think that's the word you have used. Is he one of them, and do we need to expose this some more?
I think that's definitely something that, yeah, people need to know more about and needs to be looked into a bit more. You probably know more than me about his particular evangelical background, but like you said, I wrote about the Christian right in my recent book, and there is some real overlap between some of the things that these evangelical Christians believe and some of what the alt-right is espousing. And if you believe that you know, this is a land that is given to us by God for Christians, and that it's not a land that we should have, you know, Muslim migration to, and that sort of thing. You're saying some very similar things to, you know, others on the far right who may have came to those views not from a religious background, but from, you know, a more nationalistic one or what have you. But there's so much overlap there, and I think that you know, Batchelor talking about co-governance leading us to becoming, you know, Zimbabwe of the South Pacific, or making reference to like civil war and that sort of thing. I think that that's not unconnected to evangelical background he comes from. So I think that's definitely a relevant part of the story that I think even people going along to his meetings and being supportive of what he's saying maybe don't know that part of his background so much.
They probably wouldn't care. You know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, even if you're someone who in fact, I saw a poll somewhere. I can't even remember what it was, but it was on Twitter today. I should go and find it and bring it to the end of the show. They said something like, would you support a Nazi ideology if it got rid of gender reaffirming surgery? And it was like an 80% support said yes. And it was like 10,000 votes. So, you know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I think the people who want to stop co-governance, whatever sort of amorphous word that means to them, wouldn't care about the person's background as long as they're spouting that rhetoric to get them what they want.
Yeah, I think there's few people who'd be put off by his evangelical background if they're in agreement with him about what he's saying about co-governance and decolonization and so forth.
Hey, dude, thank you so much for jumping in. And
no problem.
I don't know if Leon's still watching, but Leon, kia ora koutou, thanks for giving us a call this evening, and good to see you all doing the hard mahi up there, not down there, up there, because I'm in Dunedin. But always good to chat, Byron, and we will talk again super soon. Thanks for being with us tonight, man.
Wonderful, thank you.
All right, Byron Clark, of course, out of Christchurch, at the what do you call it? Anti co-governance protest. I don't know if that is indeed the correct term. All right, team, let's wrap up tonight's show with a story about, speaking of racists, about Leo Molloy. He had come out apologising for something that he was involved with when it comes to a so-called roast or debate that they held on Tuesday night. I was going to cover it, but I chose not to because, you can only have so much of this. But it's come out again today that not only was the debate pretty revolting and disgusting, no matter how many people try and tell me on Twitter, it was just a roast. They were just jokes. I'll explain that shortly as to why that's a horseshit argument. Let's have a look at the news story about Leo Molloy tonight.
Auckland bar owner Leo Molloy today apologised to an Auckland councillor for a racist slur at a high-profile fundraising event for the mayor held at Malloy's bar.
In a menu printed for the event, a supposed joke order item, a chocolate chip shake, described as thick as wet concrete, was named after two Pacifica councillors. Perry Wilton has the story.
Al Philippine is an Auckland councillor who knows how to take a joke.
Do you mind if I grab your name and your title, please?
Yeah, Al Philippine, a fitness fanatic.
Yes, thank you.
But on Tuesday, he feels a line was crossed.
Offended. Who wouldn't?
On a list of joke menu items at a dinner for the Mayoral Relief Fund, one was titled Alf and Josephine's Chocolate Chip Cookie Shake, thick as wet cement and as useful as an ashtray on a motorbike.
Chocolate chip cookie? Please. Years ago, we know what chocolate chippy is about dark people. For those that say, oh, they're just oversensitive, well, maybe if you end up living in an environment in the early days of people calling you racial terms, how would you feel?
The event was a roast, raising cash for Wayne Brown's Mayoral Relief Fund. Brown was joined by a high-profile cast including Judith Collins, Sir Graham Henry, Shane Jones and Guy Williams at Leo Molloy's Viaduct Bar, HQ. But neither Alf nor Josephine Bartley were present. They found out when a photo of the menu was shared on social media.
Nobody told us. Nobody said you were going to be mentioned. Are you okay with that?
Event organizer Leo Molloy apologised today. In a statement to News Hub, he said, the dessert option described as being part of the Alf and Josephine offering was poorly thought out. No racial slur was ever intended, and if Alf or Josephine is offended, we apologise.
I just want to acknowledge Leo, who organised the event, because he rang me. We had a conversation, and he obviously didn't check. But I know that he's not a racist. So those people that put that menu together about Josephine and I, they may have issues around racism.
The menu also included a jab at LGBTQ community pronouns, saying them, they, who the f*** cares? No one gives a f***, sweetie. The mayor's office was approached for comment. They called it a light-hearted evening which raised $13,000 for Auckland flood relief. Mayor Brown says he was not responsible for nor had any prior knowledge of the menu. He is yet to apologise. Perry Wilton, News Hub.
I mean, I don't know if the mayor needs to, I mean, not to defend them all now, I don't know if the mayor needs to apologise because, as he said, he wasn't involved with the menu. But like I said on Twitter today, go figure, colour me surprised, a debate featuring Sean Plunket and Wayne Brown, organised by Leo Molloy, had sort of racist and homophobic undertones. What? Who would have seen that one coming? Now, I've got an image of the actual menu here, just so we can have a look at what we thought about it. And you can let me know what you think about it. Here is the menu right here. So you can see that it's got Chloe's green salad. It's got Simon Wilson's bitter and twisted root veggies. I've actually been speaking to Simon. He couldn't come on tonight, unfortunately. It's got Jacinda and Clark's mixed mash. It's got the spin-off left-leaning horizontal pizza, 100% funded by the taxpayer. Tastes like it's been eaten before. Alf and Josephine's chocolate chip cookie shake. That's the one, thick as wet cement, useful as an ashtray on a motorbike. Jesse Mulligan and Peter Calder cheese board. Something very smelly, something soft, a couple of weird fruits not to be taken seriously, and a handful of nuts. And then there's the LGBTQTTIQ at Z word salad. Them, they, who the fuck cares? No one gives a fuck, sweetie. Just get it done and wash your hands afterwards. Now, here's the thing, yeah? I put this up on Twitter and I was like, oh, you know, who colour me surprised that there was racial undertones. I had and I'll say so-called comedian, maybe he was a comedian, maybe he still is a comedian, I don't know, but someone who I don't see much in the comedy world right now, who said to me, it's called a roast, Pat. You did a podcast on comedy and don't know what a roast is? Now, I do know what comedy is. I've worked for many years professionally in the world of comedy. I've performed in multiple New Zealand International Comedy Awards. I've been paid to work in comedy. So I do understand what comedy is, although I also acknowledge that comedy is subjective. Some people can find some things funny that other people don't. So yes, I do know what comedy, and yes, I do a comedy podcast as well. Well, I have done. I've been a bit slow on that recently because of other things going on. However, I have been involved in roasts. And I'm a huge fan of roasts. Roasts, in general, are offensively funny. If in a roast you don't go, oh, that one's a bit close to the bone, then the roast is not good enough. However, there's an unwritten rule in roasts, and that is the people attending the roasts sign up to have the shit taken out of them. You don't sign up for some random person on the other side of town to have the shit taken out of them. You don't get to throw racist and homophobic slurs at someone else who's not there and hasn't been asked permission about this, because what that is just an excuse for you to throw racial and homophobic slurs. This is what I wrote in response to the comedian. I won't write the first part because that identifies who they are. A roast is where you battle one another who choose to participate and sign an unwritten contract to have the piss taken, just using racist and homophobic slurs towards people who, one, are not there, and two, have not signed on to the idea of being involved, is just a way for people to use racist and homophobic slurs. Not part of comedy, not part of the unwritten rules of the roast, of which I have participated in many. Now, the other thing, and the final thing I think I'll say about a roast, is a roast involves comedians. Typically. At the very least, it involves comedian writers who write jokes. You don't do a roast. Well, you could do a roast with politicians, but when politicians and political figures, and in this case, lunatic right-wing broadcasters, try and make jokes, mind you, I've got to be careful. Not necessarily saying that they have made racist and homophobic jokes. So this is, I said, the underlying. But people who are adept and skilled in comedy are the people who do roasts. So what it looks like to me on some level is Leo Molloy, and you all know him from his attempt to try and be the Auckland mayor, who is by choice the most abrasive man in Auckland, has gone, fuck it, say what you want. It's a roast. That gives us license to say whatever we want. It's not how it works. And the one thing to come out of this, which I got to say probably is I'm surprised by, is on some level, Leo Molloy actually apologised. He kind of didn't, because he did that whole bullshit, no, if you're offended by what I said, I'm sorry that you're offended, which is not actually an apology. But compared to what the mayor did, which is basically saying light-hearted jabs, I mean, I think a statesman would have gone, I didn't think that taking those racist and homophobic slurs were in the spirit of the overall night. I regret that they got out there. They had nothing to do with me, but I regret that they got out there, and I'm sorry if anyone was upset by them for something that someone else did. However, the actual things we did behind the mic was nothing like that. That part of it was too far, and I disengage. I distance myself from that. But of course, Mayor Brown didn't do that. He went, it was light-hearted jabs, menus not to do with me. Anyway. Hey, thanks for being with us tonight. We didn't get Chewy in the end. I guess the comedy gig he's at has been going on for too long and is too good. So let me just say finish by saying this one thing to you. You can, of course, get to our shop, bhnshop.nz. We have drops on there at the moment, which will only be there until the 20th of July. Then they go away forever. One of the drops, of course, is if the left vote, the left wins. You know my theories behind that. You've been with us for long enough. That if the left votes, the left will win. The left are apathetic. The left are the people who choose not to get involved in politics enough, and that keeps it close between the right and the left. If everyone who was a left party voter, from wherever you were, voted, it would be a landslide to the left. So if the left vote, the left win. T-shirts and hoodies, and the other T-shirt and hoodie is, of course, Christopher Luxon, not a businessman, just a board member, because he's not a businessman. He is just a board member. He's never started a business. He sat on boards on businesses that other people have started, but he hasn't. If you want to support this, if you want to support what we do, bhnshop.nz, you can order up until the 20th of July. We will be posting these out, sending these out free if you're in New Zealand, free before the end of July. And other than that, thank you for being with us this week, and thank you for your support, be it financial, like with these T-shirts and hoodies, be it part of our Patreon, be it that you are an advocate for us and you're sharing our stuff around. I'm getting more and more reports every single day of people sharing our stuff to various sources, and other people going, we've just discovered you. That is a brilliant thing you guys can do as well and help us get out there. Appreciate you being with us tonight. Thank you for everyone who's been involved. Remember, tomorrow there'll be some clips out on YouTube. There'll also be clips out through the weekend as well, both on the audio podcast and on YouTube and on Twitter as well. So get involved, share them around. Thanks everyone. You're all awesome, says Peter, and I concur with that. Appreciate you all. Love you to bits. Not sure if I'll be here on Monday night. I'm in Auckland this weekend sorting out my dad's apartment. I'm due to get back to Dunedin on Monday. So there will either be a show or there'll be a best of. I'm not sure which it is yet, but I'll probably see you Monday night at 9 p.m. If I don't see you Monday night at 9 p.m, I'll see you Tuesday night at 9 p.m. for another edition of Big Hairy News. Thank you, team. Love you to bits. Hooroo.